Chapter 18, The Farewell. About 5 days before leaving for Mexico, I went to see my dad in Chapo. He gave me Loya's phone number and told me to buy a new phone, that he preferred Uniphone, and to let Loya know when I was already in Mexico. And I told them, again, that everything was good and that everything would go ahead, and they told me whatever I thought and however I felt, to be very careful with the enemies and the Mexican government. Although there was a truce, they knew. That's what the two of them told me. Mayo and Chapo told me that the truce had been made on purpose so that they would gain their trust and hand them over to the government, which was what Arturo and Vicente Carrillo were plotting. By then, what happened to my Uncle Ray had already happened, and they handed him over. They had put him with the Ciedo. My dad told me, well, go and may God bless you. It's for your own good. Take a risk, and hopefully you'll be able to make your life your own. It's what you've always wanted, and so have I. So go, and be very careful. And that day was the last day I saw my father. It's what you always wanted? Sounded like you wanted to be in the game. Sounded like you've been in the game your whole life. Sounded like the next 50 years of the game were about to be gifted to you. And your father telling you that you might as well turn yourself in lets me know that your father saw that this thing of yours would not last. That the Sinaloa cartel as we knew it would not last. He knew it. He knew it. Otherwise, why the end game? Why the conversations about sending these kids, these juniors, and giving them the permission to snitch? Because he knew that the game wasn't going to last. It wasn't sustainable. 2 days after I saw them, I left for Mexico City. I left Culiacan. My wife, Zintia Balboa Zazueta, had stomach surgery, so I went alone. But I also went with her wherever I went. I went and said goodbye to my mom. Neither she nor anyone else knew what I was going to Mexico for, except for my dad and El Chapo. I told my wife so she'd know in case anything happened. I left early on Sunday morning in a car with another guy who was driving. He and I traveled alone that whole day. We arrived in Mexico City around 3 p.m. I checked in with Loya and told him I was already there. He asked if I could see him that same day. I said yes. He met me at the Hard Rock Cafe in Polanco. It was nighttime. When I was near the place, I texted him and told him to walk across the street from the Hard Rock Cafe. There was an Italian restaurant there, and I'd be there to see him. We arrived almost at the same time. We sat down at a table. He told me he'd already notified the DEA. They told him they'd let him know if the appointment was the next day or the day after. That day was Monday, March 15th, 2009, if I recall correctly. We were at the restaurant for about 2 hours. He told me everything was fine and that I shouldn't worry, that the DEA were good people and that he already knew them well, that it would be a first conversation and that they would tell me what they wanted from me, how we were going to do it, and that I should ask any questions that I had. They already knew I wasn't going to give away information about my dad or Chapo, that what they wanted was information about the enemies, that was how they had agreed with him. He said not to worry, that everything was fine, that it was the first step, but that my life was going to get better. That was the important thing and what I wanted. We said goodbye. He would let me know the time of the meeting, whether it was the next day or if there was a change. The war between Mayo and El Chapo against the Beltran Leyva and Vicente Carrillo gangs came at a high cost for everyone. Their massive firepower resulted in multiple casualties on both sides. Furthermore, both groups used their henchmen in the Attorney General's office, the PGR, the Army, and the Federal Public Security Secretariat to orchestrate strategic arrests against their adversaries. So both groups used the police to their advantage. Both groups fingered each other to law enforcement. Both groups were cooperators. Both groups, when in trouble, called the police. So the meeting between Vicentillo and the DEA took place in a context that was, to say the least, complicated. 3 PFP police chiefs, Velasco, Millán, and La Bastida, had been assassinated in a row in 2008, each for being loyal to the wrong side. The arrests on both sides had been painful. Alfredo Beltran Leyva, January 2008, Jesus Zambada Garcia, October 2008, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. To top it all off, Mourinho's recent plane crash had considerably increased the tension. Regarding Vicentillo's meeting with the DEA, lawyer pointed out that, in 2007, I asked Manny to help Vicente by getting him the same treatment I'd received. Vicente had been formally indicted in 2003 in Washington, D.C. on drug charges along with El Mayo. Vicente has said he was tired of the life he was living, tired of avoiding assassinations by his father's rivals. Vicente said he'd be happy if he continued passing information to the United States in exchange for the same treatment I'd received. Within the Sinaloa cartel, only El Mayo and El Chapo knew what was going on. It didn't suit anyone to let the others know that the boss's son was going to be an informant. Of course that's not. Especially when they're telling everybody at the bottom to not be pointing fingers. Especially when they're raising their paper soldiers, in this culture of, nah, we don't talk to the police. What? You talk to the police probably more than you talk to anybody else. Lawyer had guaranteed the safety of Vicentillo, who was 34 at the time. The scheme involving his work for the DEA had worked for him. In 2008, his charges were dismissed in the Southern District of California, so he'd hoped the same would happen with El Mayo's son, lawyer explained in the letter. In February 2009, Manny told me that the prosecutor in Washington, D.C. had agreed that Vicente would do the same thing I had done, and that the DEA was also in agreement. We scheduled a meeting in Mexico City where DEA agents from Washington and Mexico would speak with Vicente, and we would all agree to the same deal I had. Mayo didn't know. When he hugged his most beloved son, whom he had condemned to death or to become a criminal, that it would be the last time he would see him, at least for the next 10 years. On Tuesday, March 16th, the day after we had dinner around 10 p.m., lawyer sent me a message and told me to go to the Sheraton Hotel, the one on Reforma Avenue in front of the Angel of Independence in Mexico City, next to the U.S. Embassy in Mexico. Right there next to where they got Panu, in that major metropolitan money area. I'm leaving for that place. I was at a house I rented in the El Pedregal neighborhood. I leave in my car alone, with another car behind me with two people, the ones who are looking after me, escorting me, or whatever you want to call it. I arrive at the Sheraton Hotel, get out of my car on the street outside, and tell one of the guys who came with me to take the car and wait for me somewhere in the lobby or at the Sanborns on the corner. I'll call them on the Nextel when I get out. They didn't know what I was going to do or who I was going with. I hope you picked the dumbest ones. The dumbest ones won't see it coming. I guess they're used to secretive shit, happening all the time around y'all. But hopefully you picked the dumb ones, because anyone that's not so dumb would have probably picked up on what you were doing. I entered the lobby, and lawyer was already waiting for me there. I greeted him, and we headed for the elevator. As the door was closing, someone reached in, and it opened again, and a person got in. He pressed several elevator buttons, and I turned to look at him because something seemed strange and irregular to me. Lawyer and I exchanged glances about what the person had done, and suddenly lawyer said to me, "Don't worry, he's one of us, one of the ones who came to see you." Right there in the elevator, he introduced me to him. I greeted him. We arrived at the floor indicated we were going to. I don't know which floor it was because all the buttons were pressed, and I didn't realize which one the elevator stopped on. We arrived at a room. The person who was with us knocked on the door, and they opened it. Another person was inside the room. Lawyer, the person who was with us on the elevator, entered, and they closed the door. Before we sat down, still at the entrance to the room, the two people identified themselves, showed me some badges, or charrolas, as we say in Mexico, and told me they were DEA agents. They asked me if I had a gun or any type of weapon. I said no. They told me we'd leave the phones and Nextels in the bathroom, and they did the same. Then we went to a small room in the room. It was a small table with two chairs. I sat on one. The guy who came in the DEA elevator sat on the other. I don't remember his name. And on the bed sat lawyer and the other DEA agent named Manny. Well, that's what I remember him saying. We finished greeting each other, and they asked me how I was, not to worry, and that everything was fine. "Nobody wants this life," Gasiola told me, defending Vicentillo for his extreme decision to work for the DEA and betray the world he was born into. Vicente had no choice. Since they tried to kill him at 16, he never lived again. His wife, Cynthia, has been his lifelong partner. She was his girlfriend, and ever since then, she has always lived in hiding. When he went public, he had to do so under false names. Fernando Garciola truly cared for Vicentillo. He cared for him. He didn't want to harm him, but he wanted the truth to be known through this story. Lawyer wrote in his letter, "On the day of the meeting, Manny told me that the meeting had been canceled by his boss, the Director General of the DEA in Mexico, because a newspaper article had appeared indicating a possible leak about the meeting. The article spoke of contacts between the DEA and drug trafficking leaders. I insisted that the meeting take place because Vicente had put himself in danger by traveling to Mexico City and that this wouldn't sit well with Chapo and Mayo if the meeting was canceled. Manny tells me that thank you very much for having attended the meeting, that they knew the risks and dangers that I ran when moving from Mazatlan to Mexico City, and that was why they were receiving me, because of my good intentions and my goodwill to approach them, and because of Loya, because he was a very good friend of theirs, and so as not to let him down. The reason they were telling me that was because the meeting had been canceled, that their boss, the head of Latin America for the DEA, who was the one I was going to speak to, had canceled because at the last minute there had been a leak of information that the DEA was going to have a meeting with someone important to the cartel, and that's why it had been canceled. And they asked me if I knew anything about that or if anyone else knew about the meeting. I told them that from my side, the only ones who knew, and they were already aware of it, were Mayo and El Chapo and Loya. They told me they didn't know how they had gotten the story or information into a newspaper. And they showed me a piece of paper containing the information. And yes, it said there would be a meeting in Mexico between the DEA and someone from the cartel, but it didn't say who or even names. I told them I didn't know anything about it, and they said they didn't either, but that they were already investigating, and that was why their boss wouldn't be able to come that day. But they wanted to see me to explain it to me personally, that according to their boss, he didn't know they were meeting with me at that time. I asked them who else knew about the meeting besides their boss in Washington. At first they told me it was just them, that it was top secret. I asked them again if anyone in the Mexican government knew, and Manny told me only one person. I asked him who it was and why. They told me no one else knew, and Manny told me that the Attorney General, Mr. Edward Medina Mora, knew. In his letter, under oath, Loya stated, "The meeting took place only with Manny and another agent named David. Manny told Vicente that he would receive the same treatment as me and that it had been approved by the Washington prosecutor and the DEA, that the Washington agents were at the hotel. The Deputy Regional Director for Latin America, Carlos N., also agreed to the meeting and had authorized the same plan to proceed. Manny also said that as soon as everything calmed down, we would have a full meeting as planned. At the meeting, Manny told Vicente and me that he would receive full credit for the information he had previously provided. Also at the meeting, Vicente told the DEA agents that he would give them information on the location of a key fugitive from the Arellano Felix cartel that the United States wants arrested. Vicente clarified that he had already passed on information through Chapo, Richard Arroyo Guisal, and me. Richard Arroyo Guisal, as mentioned above, was arrested in October 2008 along with Jesus Zambada Reyes and his stepfather, Ray, after which he entered the PGR's Witness Protection Program. It is understood that Arroyo also shared information with the DEA at Vicentillo's request. All right, so not only was this system and this process handed down, right, to Vicentillo, but Vicentillo was actively handing it down to other people beneath him. Snitching is a system in the cartel. Cooperation with law enforcement is a system in the cartel. For example, how the cartel used the airline Aviones S.A. based at Mexico City Airport to traffic drugs, and how Garcia Luna's police helped them unload and transport the merchandise. When Vicentillo learned that someone else knew about the meeting, he felt uneasy. You think? So I felt uncomfortable, and I told them that no one knew about the appointment except them and that they were not going to tell anyone. And Manny told me that his bosses agreed to notify the Attorney General, that he was aware and that there was no problem, that I should not worry. They told me they would speak with their boss to see if he would meet with me the next day or 1 or 2 days later, taking advantage of the fact that I had approached him. They would convince him, and if I could wait another day, they would let me know through lawyer if the appointment was going ahead, and if not, so I could go back out and not have to wait and reschedule the appointment. They said if I wanted to go to the appointment somewhere else in the country or another city, they would take care of everything and it was no problem. Listen, they told the Attorney General. Now you wonder why the U.S. doesn't tell Mexico anything? Because if you could tell the Attorney General and that get back to the cartel, it's a leaky boat, man. Extremely leaky boat. There's more leaks in the boat than there is boat. If I wanted to be in the United States, they would take me across the border by car. Or if I wanted to be in the Bahamas or Puerto Rico, they would take me there by private plane. I told them I would let them know later that it was no problem for me, that I had come of my own free will and that they should let Loya know and hopefully convince their boss to come to Mexico right away so they could take advantage of the fact that I was already there. They asked me if I could help with the Zetas, with Arturo Beltran Leiva. They showed me some photos they had on a computer. They were photos of my entire family, my mother, my siblings, Manuel Torres Felix, Javier's brother, and some of Javier Torres' children. They said they were most interested in Arturo and the Zetas, that I hoped I could help them, that they hoped I could help them with the information about them, and that I shouldn't worry about my case in Washington. Oh, don't worry about it. That they had already discussed it with their bosses, that everything would be resolved, that the case was weak, that it was more like fabricated to pressure my father, and that it was the work of some Colombian witnesses who said they knew me, but that it wasn't anything special. They told me everything they had done in Tijuana, all the arrests, and that it was thanks to us. Thank you guys, bro, for putting a finger on all of those people. Appreciate y'all. You'll honor these guys, but you'll shit on somebody else that snitched. But you'll honor these guys. All the arrests, and that it was thanks to us, or rather to El Chapo and my dad, that they knew all the information came from them. They told me when they arrested El Tigre and El Nalgon on the yacht, they asked me if I could help capture the Arellano's nephew, who was also their priority at that point. They told me that when they arrested El Tigre, the nephew was also on the yacht, but that they released him along with El Tigre's family. That's what they agreed with El Tigre when he surrendered to them, when they had him surrounded on the boat, but that once I spoke with their boss, we'd talk. I really had a lot of things I could help with, but I didn't tell them because the meeting had been canceled. He was thirsty. He was like, "Excuse me, sir, I'm ready to tell you everything." I already had the Nextel numbers and the phone numbers of the Zeta Z40. I knew where Arturo, Barbie, and a lot of other people were, but they didn't want me to help them. That night they arrested me. They betrayed me, and I don't know why. The truth is, I approached them of my own free will with confidence. I don't know what happened. So, he went in there to go make a deal, to continue, because they had already set a precedent for getting people locked up. He went in there to do this deal, and they betrayed him. Say it ain't so. I can't believe it. Huh? I can't believe it. I wonder what made them do it. Vicente and I left the hotel, and a few hours later after the meeting, Vicente was arrested by Mexican authorities, lawyer wrote. To this day, I am still in contact with the DEA and continue to provide them with information. I signed this declaration under penalty of perjury of the United States of America. This letter is dated July 4, 2010 and was signed in Mexico City in the presence of attorneys Alan Paul Valenzuela Gacciola and Jorge Alberto Felix Valenzuela. I left the hotel meeting that night, saying goodbye to Loya in the lobby. He told me to wait, that they would see if the meeting was taking place and that he would let me know. I went home. I arrived and went to bed. It was around 1:32 or 1:30 in the morning. I sent my wife a text message saying I was home and everything was fine, that I'd call her the next day just to let her know I was okay. She answered and said, "How nice." I undressed and went to bed. About 2 hours later, at around 3:30, I heard glass breaking, doors being kicked down, and lots of screaming. I jumped up and ran to the entrance of the room. I looked out and saw a lot of soldiers wearing ski masks aiming at my room. At that point, I opened the door and told them it was no problem, that I was leaving, and they threw me to the ground, then to my knees. That's how they arrested me and held me incommunicado for 2 days. I didn't know where. They blindfolded me and tied my hands and feet. The following night, they transferred me to the Ciedo. I spent the whole night there until 7 in the morning. They presented me to the press and television stations. They kept me there all day. Sounds like they played you, papas, or you played yourself. Could you imagine if the government was coming down on Chapo and Mayo, and they chose to give up Vicentillo, sent them on this snitch goose chase, and put him right within reach of the police? That's just my crazy imagination going off. That's all that is. That's it. On the morning of March 19, 2009, General Luis Arturo Oliver, Deputy Chief of Operations for the EMP, announced the capture of Vicentillo. The Secretariat of National Defense reports that on the 18th of this month, military personnel arrested Vicente Zambada Niebla, alias El Vicentillo, son of Ismael Zambada Garcia, alias El Mayo Zambada, in this city. The general said at the press conference at the PGR facilities, but he gave a false version of the arrest, because in reality, the military did not have a search warrant to enter the house where Vicentillo was sleeping. The general explained that residents of Lomas de Pedregal reported the presence of vehicles with armed men, and that during the operation, several individuals carrying weapons in a suspicious manner were located in front of the residence at 279 Lluvia Street, catching Vicente Zambada Niebla in the act, along with 5 other individuals acting as his personal escort. So they didn't need a warrant. Why? Because they saw somebody walking around with a strap outside. You played yourself. As Oliver read the press release, Vicentillo, handcuffed behind his back, stood erect. His black hair was neatly cut and combed, his beard slightly grown. He wore jeans, a white striped shirt, and a dark jacket that showed off his slim figure. He looked defiantly at the dozens of photographers whose flashes were constantly flashing. The general claimed that Vicentillo was the mastermind behind several executions against authorities and members of enemy cartels. Standing there, displayed like the bearded lady in the circus, the son of Mayo exuded his anger. The day he was presented to the media, he was angry. He had already been beaten a lot, harassed, and threatened, Gacciola explained to me. Just as El Mayo and El Chapo had contacts in the army and the federal police to arrest or assassinate their enemies, Arturo Beltran Leiva had his own. He had bought their loyalties by paying them years of bribes. Vicente's arrest was proof of that. Okay, we're going to put it on Arturo? I said, okay, fine, we'll put it on Arturo. But I'm just saying, in this game, I wouldn't be surprised. These guys are denied. This system has been passed down from parents to children. The Chapitos do something, they deny. I'm just saying, I wouldn't put it past anybody. Not in that game. Not at all. Not even a little bit. President Felipe Calderón washed his hands of the division within his own government. Although General Oliver said Vicentillo was accused of several crimes, the Mexican government did not file any charges against him. Of course not. It did not open a criminal case against him and justified his arrest by stating that he was responsible for an extradition warrant issued by a U.S. court and to avoid angering his father. He allowed Vicentillo, while still in custody, to continue his meetings with the DEA. That afternoon, Manny and 4 other people came to visit me. 3 were from the DEA and 1 from the FBI. I pretended I didn't know Manny so I wouldn't put him off or make sure the others didn't find out about the meeting the day before. Right. Now, not only that, you got popped off, but you got popped off with smut on your name from the meeting that you had the day before. But as soon as we sat down, Manny said to me, how are you? Don't worry. They know what we're doing with you. They know about our conversation. And I said to him, so nobody knew? Well, he just stared at me. Evidently they knew. They were there at Ciedo for about 2 hours. They told me they didn't know what had happened, that they had nothing to do with it, and that they were very sorry, but that I shouldn't worry, and that the treatment was the same, that they spoke with them, that they knew of my goodwill, and that they would come look for me later to talk to me. Sure. That they would see what they could do for me, that they didn't know how it all happened, that the Mexican government was the one who did everything. I told them there was no need to do that I had approached their government and that I could have helped them more outside. They told me they knew about it, but that they had nothing to do with it. They asked me if I still wanted to help them. I said yes, because that's why I came over. I told them, and they just laughed. I gave them some information about the Zetas at the time. That was all I told them, and they told me they'd be looking for me later. I've been in this hell for 2 years now, and this is a rough summary of my detention and the conversations with the DEA. After about 2 or 3 months, the DEA came looking for me at the prison where I was. Given the time frame, Vicente points out in his own handwritten letter, it dates back to 2012, a year after he sought me out through Fernando Gasiola. On January 22nd, 2010, after 10 months as a habit, at 5:30 in the morning, I got up to wait for the list, or rather the roll call, which is at 6 in the morning. But I always get up earlier so I could change and make the bed because woe betide me if there were a wrinkle in the blanket or it was misplaced. And to take off my pants and put on my uniform, which I didn't really take off. I left it on underneath it. I just wrapped myself in tightly and washed my face. And I slept like that because in Toluca there isn't a day when it isn't cold, especially in the month of January. It was 8 degrees below zero. I slept with my pants down, my uniform on top, my jacket on, and 2 blankets, and that's how all the comrades slept. Instead of jail cells, they seemed like cold rooms to store fruit or meat or something so it wouldn't get lost, so it wouldn't spoil. After his arrest, Vicente Zambada Niebla was imprisoned in the Federal Social Readaptation Center No. 1, the maximum security prison better known as El Altiplano, in Almoloya, State of Mexico, located just 24 kilometers from the city of Toluca, the capital of the state of Mexico. His uncle Ray was also imprisoned in that prison. His friend Chapo escaped from that same place in 2015. It wasn't impossible that his father planned an escape for his favorite son, but Vicentillo didn't want any more trouble with the law. He had been a fugitive from his father's enemies since he was 16. He didn't want to run anymore. Although he had faced difficult things in life, he had never tasted the literal flavor of prison, uniform, bars, loneliness, dog food, and cold. Gasiola told me that Mayo suffered from his son's confinement, although he obviously couldn't understand it no matter how hard he tried, having never experienced it himself. He experienced it now. He sent lawyers to speak with him daily to confirm that he wasn't being mistreated. To wake us up at 5:30, Rogelio, the cellmate in cell 4, was the one who got us up. He was the only one who had the alarm on his television and would hit the wall 6 or 7 times on the cell next to him, and so on with the next one and the next one until he got to me. Although almost always we were already awake because it was a habit. But just in case, because yes, there were times when one of my companions fell asleep, or I did too. And woe to the one who wasn't ready, standing in front of the bars, well wrapped up with his hands behind his back in the bed made. Apart from the yelling and scolding you got, it was punishment. It was 30 days without family visits, without phone calls. And that day, speaking on phone calls, I had my call with my family scheduled for 6 p.m. The call was scheduled for every 10 days, and it was already around 5:30 p.m., half an hour before my call. I was already nervous and desperate, because here in this place, that's how you always live. Nervous or waiting for something unpleasant to happen. The irony, huh? If they felt like it, they wouldn't answer your call. Thank God this never happened to me since they authorized my call. Until that day, and it wasn't because they didn't answer at home or because it was busy or it went to voicemail, as they sometimes told several unlucky colleagues as if they were ignorant, they would tell them it went to voicemail, even though it was a home phone. Or maybe I'm the ignorant one. But if you didn't answer a home phone, a recording would come on saying that the phone was out of service or out of area. It would say out of service when it was cut, but not out of area. That's from a cell phone. Mayo sent a young lawyer he trusted to take care of his son's needs in prison, Oscar Manuel Gomez Núñez. Gasiola called him Oscarín. Oscar was Vicente's lawyer, the one in charge during Vicente's arrest in Mexico. He was in charge of protecting him in prison, passing messages, Gasiola told me. In 2012, Oscar was the lawyer for another Mayo associate, Felipe Cabrera Sarabia. And in 2014, when El Chapo was recaptured in Mazatlan, his lawyer was Oscar, who visited him at the Cefreso prison, sending and receiving messages. He did so for a short time, as in July 2015, El Chapo escaped from prison again. Months later, in October 2015, Oscar was arrested by the Peña Nieto administration, accused of being an accomplice in Guzman Loera's escape. Of course, he wouldn't spend much time in the shadows. In October 2018, he was released after posting bail. Fortunately, his complicity in the escape was confirmed during El Chapo's trial in New York, which began in November 2018. Meanwhile, on January 22, 2010, Oscarín was no longer able to see Vicentillo. Well, an officer arrives and tells me to approach the bars, and I thought I was going to answer the call. I said to myself, is this the miracle that they're going to give it to me on time? But no. He said, get all your things ready, and then in 5 minutes they'll come for you. I said, what's going on? What happened? Where will I go? I thought it was a cell change because they had been doing changes for days, just in case. I said goodbye to everyone as was customary with everyone who was moved, because you don't know where you go, because they never tell you anything. So I got everything ready in a hurry, and the commander arrived asking if I was ready. I told him yes. I grabbed all my things, wrapped in a blanket, went out to the hallway in front of me, and saw that they were also checking my uncle Reinaldo Zambada, alias the King, with his things. I didn't like it anymore. I said, what's going on? Well, they were moving him too. They transferred us to the COC, Common Operations Center. That's the name of one of the modules that houses the infirmary, and it's where they check you in when you're leaving the prison. That's when I said, they're taking us out of here. I started to get nervous because I already knew or imagined the type of transfer, since being in Mexico and involving us. Worse, I said. Well, a doctor checks us for everything, our blood pressure, they take our fingerprints again, like when you come in and they never tell you anything. It's with your head down and without speaking or asking questions, and well, you get used to it because that's how it's always been since I came in. You couldn't even speak or see anyone. They already checked us because my uncle was also there, and although I didn't see him because they had him in another room, I could hear his voice. They took us to customs. Once we were in customs, I saw about 60 people wearing helmets, hoods, batons, as if they were going to be in a march or a rally where there were going to be riots or something like that, which are very rare in Mexico. There are almost never marches. He laughed at that. There's almost never marches. He laughed at that. He laughed at that. Okay? He laughed at that. It's a joke to these guys that the people of Mexico don't stand up out of fear. Even in the midst of the difficulties, Vicentillo's writings about that episode reveal an ironic, mocking attitude. He not only mocked the circumstances, but also himself. It's likely that from that moment on, the image of himself as a clown was born, which he would later capture in the crude self-portrait that illustrates the cover of this book. This is what this book was supposed to be, not a list of people he snitched on. Those who have been in the same situation have told me that the type of searches performed in Mexican maximum security prisons are degrading. They search their rectums and force them to do squats to verify they're not hiding anything inside their bodies. I've learned that prisoners are hiding everything from drugs to cell phones. Almoloya's corruption has been ongoing before Vicentillo's arrival, during his stay, and after his departure. Well, hell begins like when I first arrived. They yell at you. They took off all my clothes, taking video, photos. Well, this was after I had put my clothes on. That's why I say, because from the moment the officer was yelling at me, take this off, take 3 steps forward, and this, they were already taking video. I see them arrive with my uncle, and they do the same thing. They handcuff our hands and feet and bandage our faces. They put a bandage on me, and on top of it, tape, tightly bandaging my entire head, not just my eyes. They grabbed me and put me in a white van because I managed to see it before they bandaged me up. You know how I got in? I couldn't see, with my hands and feet tied, so I couldn't. The man helped me. Since they were really nice, they grabbed me with the gentleness with which one grabs a dead pig that's being taken to the market slaughterhouse to be sold. Ha ha ha, come on. Are you what? Are you salty you were being mistreated? Pretty sure somebody during your reign was mistreated under your watch. I mean, the irony. Between two of them, I felt them lift me up and throw me out. I fell into the van. Then my uncle followed, but on the other side, not with me. The van had a partition in the middle, and we were each on one side. We got out, and after 3 or 4 minutes of driving, they stopped and opened the door. They grabbed me and took me out and put us in another place, which I didn't know where or what, because I was blindfolded and my hands hurt from the tight handcuffs. I heard my uncle being brought up. Now I felt him close to me. And in about 10 minutes, I knew we were in a helicopter. They turned it on. I heard another second. I don't know, but I think there were two. He got up, and they took me, crouching aside as if I could see. My back has been hurting ever since. Oh, Dito. After about 30 or 40 minutes, we landed. They lowered me, feeling my way, step here, step there, and I heard them taking my picture. I heard the flashes, and they told me to lift your face. And I heard 6 flashes. At the same time, they put us in a car, more like a truck or something like that, because it took 2 or 3 steps to get in. They sat me in the middle of the seats, and 2 federal agents sat on each side of me, holding my arms. They kept me there on the truck for about 3 hours. The truck stopped, unable to start. Even the federal agents were complaining about what was happening, that they couldn't stand the heat and not moving anymore. At that point, they were kinder, of course. All of you guys get real nice when you're suffering. I couldn't bear my neck anymore from bending over, and one of them said to me, "How are you feeling, Vicente? Are you tired?" "Yes, my back can't bear it," I told him. "Sit down properly, don't worry, get comfortable," he said, and ordered another of them to uncuff me so I could be comfortable. And so I rested. After about 3 hours, they handcuffed me again and bent me down, just as we were about to leave. So we started off. And from the moment we started, it was all about braking and turning, jumping curbs and speed bumps as fast as the truck could go. I was so dizzy, I was almost sick. I held it in. But I don't know how I did it, honestly. I think it was because I was so scared they'd give me hell if I threw up. Ha ha ha. This guy's all jokes, huh? Definitely sound like a clown. Vicentillo had an open criminal record in the United States since January 2003 in the District Court of Columbia, the District of Columbia Court in Washington, D.C. He was charged with conspiracy to import 5 kilograms or more of cocaine and to manufacture and distribute cocaine with the intent and knowledge that the drugs would be trafficked to the United States. He was co-defendant with his father and Javier Torres Felix, a cartel collaborator. His name and the names of his wife, Zintia Borboa Zazueta, his mother, Rosario Niebla Caldoza, and his sister, Maitecita, Miriam, Patricia, Modesta, and Monica del Rosario were published on the OFAC blacklist as individuals linked to the Sinaloa cartel and with whom it is prohibited to do business in that country. 5 companies belonging to the business empire created by El Mayo were also published. Shortly after his arrest in Mexico, another criminal case was opened against him on April 23, 2009 in the Northern District of Chicago Court, charging him with 2 counts of conspiracy to traffic heroin and cocaine into the United States, as well as obtaining weapons and using violence to defend his drug trafficking business. With their sirens on and the loudspeaker on the patrol car or cars that were opening the way, they did not stop shouting from the moment we started moving cars out of the way until it finally stopped. They got me off. It's a good thing they were holding me by each arm and shoulder because the ground was spinning. I didn't know what I was doing. I was so dizzy and my blood pressure was very low. I was sweating. I heard the jet engines of a plane and the officer said to me, "Be careful, please. You're going up some stairs. Put your foot on the first one. From there, count 18 more so you can navigate." Well, I boarded last, the 18th, and I was counting them. They were guiding me down the aisle of the plane, and I heard a woman's voice say, "Let's bring him up here." "Here," she said. "Put him in the back, in the window seat." So as I sat down, I heard my uncle being seated in the back. Then a woman arrived, lifted my head, and ordered an officer to remove the blindfold. The first thing I saw was a white spot, stars, and a blur, until my vision cleared and she said, "Lift your face." And she said, "Mr. Vicente, you're on the federal police plane. Don't worry, I'm in charge of the plane. You're being transferred to another prison. I'm not going to tell you where because, We learned your life is in danger in the prison you were in, and the transfer is for your safety. Don't worry, relax. I can see you're feeling unwell. Are you feeling okay? Well, more or less, I said. Yes, I can tell, he said. Don't worry, the doctor's here. A doctor arrived and took my blood pressure. She told me it was low, that I should relax, and ordered the plane not to take off until she took my blood pressure again. I told her I was fine, and then the plane took off. Okay, the manager told me, I'm not going to put the blindfold on you, but please keep your head down and don't look anywhere. The police plane transported Vicentillo to northeast Mexico, to Tamaulipas, where his father, El Chapo, and Arturo Beltran had waged a fierce war against the Gulf Cartel and Los Zetas to steal their territory and add it to their list of border crossings for drug trafficking to the United States. It's ironic that they transferred him to that very place. They took him to Federal Social Readaptation Center Number 3, better known as Noreste, located in Matamoros. It was the prelude to his extradition. After about 2 hours, maybe sooner, the plane suddenly landed. I felt it, because the tires made contact with the pavement, but they never announced anything. We arrived. The plane stopped. They bandaged me again, and the lady said no one should get off, ordering the officers because the plane was full of PFP forces. We were detained on board for about 2 hours. They take us downstairs, hand us over to the prison's officers, take off my handcuffs, and put my new ones on me. The moment they handed me over to them, hell began. I thought you was just in hell over there the other time. I thought you was in hell over there. Now you in hell over here? Coño, man. The moment they put the handcuffs on me, which they put on as tight as they could, and they started yelling at me, searching me everywhere, I was wearing a watch tucked into my shirt because the federal agents had thrown it on the plane. And he said to me, "Is this your watch?" "Yes, sir," I said. That's where they threw it. I hadn't finished saying that before he was yelling in my ear. "I asked you if it was yours, asshole. Just answer me yes or no. That's it." It's crazy how these guys could feel like they could feel treated badly as many people as they've treated badly. You know what I mean? Shy, you think criminals should be abused? No. I just think irony should be, observed and called out. They put me in the truck. On top he said, "Bend down, bend all the way forward like you're going to hurt your feet." And he tied my feet and hands together like this, crouched, all bent over. And the truck had a ring, something like that, on the floor. And now I was all tied up, my feet and hands. Like when you tie a cow's hands and feet, like this. And he grabbed other handcuffs and put them between the ring on the floor and tied it between my hands and feet. And I was tied up without being able to move at all, crouched like this. When we took off, oh man, we went full speed ahead. Curves, speed bumps, potholes, sudden breaks. And I couldn't hold on because I was tied hand and foot together, holding on by the sheer strength of my legs. The handcuffs got tighter and tighter, and my back couldn't hold on anymore. It got to the point where I couldn't even feel my legs anymore. Sometimes I leaned against the truck with my head, but we couldn't do anything. They kept shouting at us, "Don't move, be quiet, don't talk." No one spoke. My uncle and I never spoke. It was just us shouting at each other. I could only hear my uncle's breathing, like he was going through the same thing in the same way I was and couldn't stand it anymore. The poor guy, too. No, it's something I wouldn't wish on anyone. Oh, you wouldn't wish it on anyone? I wouldn't wish cartel hits on anyone. I wouldn't wish none of the horrible shit that you did in the name of the Father. All right? I wouldn't wish that on nobody, papas. I'll explain. But I lived through it and thought they were going to kill us. The truth is, I said, these guys are going to hand us over to the other people. I didn't think anything of it. We went down the highway on a dirt road. I said, no, they're going to hand us over to someone. Ha ha ha. You were scared. Call it what it was. You were scared. They were going to turn you over to your enemies. It stopped suddenly. They opened the door and shone a flashlight on us because it was already nighttime. I can imagine how we looked at each other, like two animals tied up and blindfolded. I couldn't stand it anymore. I wasn't interested in the screams, in anything, whether they hit me or not. There comes a time when what you want is for whatever happens to happen. At that moment, they took us to customs. I knew why they got us off. They got me off first, like a pig pulled. They threw me to the ground. One of them dragged me about a meter, sat me down, and said, "Spread your legs as wide as you can." With my feet wide open, he said, "I'm going to tie your hands behind your back." Then he put the handcuffs on me and yelled, "Now bend over as far as you can and stay like that. I don't want you to move." And they put a dog in front of me that wanted to eat me, barking and barking right up against my face, like 3 fingers away from your face, so you're covered in dog slobber. And on the other side, the officer yelled at you, who actually preferred the dog. The officer's snout stank worse than the dog's. Ha 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 ha. This guy's hilarious. They removed the blindfold, and crouching down, I turned my eyes to the side and saw my uncle lying next to me, with the dog also barking at him, and another officer barking at him. I felt so angry and so sad seeing my uncle like that. I thought he thought the same thing about me, I think. They had us lying like that for about half an hour. They lifted me up. I lied. First they lifted my uncle up. I stayed like that for another 20 or 30 minutes while they shouted at my uncle to take off his clothes and do everything else you have to do when you enter one of those prisons. Then I followed. They kneeled me, put me like this against the wall, told me to open my mouth. They checked your whole body. If you had scars, a doctor checked you. All of this was done while they shouted at you. The moment came when you went deaf with the noise. No, a buzzing in your head, and you answered out of inertia. I couldn't feel my hands. My back couldn't hold it. And then the officer gave me a glass of water. "Oh, look how nice," I said to myself. Ha 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 ha. "But no," he said. "Turn your face to the ceiling and open your mouth." And he threw the water into my mouth. "If you drink it, hold on, I'll tell you when to throw it up. Gargle." Oh man, well, I choked. I couldn't hold it, and I threw the water up. "Didn't I tell you until I told you to?" Well, another glass of water, and there I was again, drowning. But I held on as best as I could, and then he gave me the clothes and ordered me to put them on. I was a size 32 in pants, so he gave me a size 42, and my pants were falling down. That's how they took me inside, arms behind my back, crouching forward and running. And if you fell, you'd be damned if they dragged you. All I wanted was to get to the cell. I couldn't feel my legs, hands, or back anymore. I don't know how I was standing, to be honest. Beyond the promises made by the DEA, what they didn't warn Vicentillo was that the Chicago prosecutor's office was expanding his case file. In August 2009, the prosecutor's office increased the charges against him, adding his father, El Chapo, and the brothers, Margarito and Pedro Flores, Juancho, Germán Olivares, Tomás Arevalo Renteria, and others as co-defendants. It was the first time he was accused of being a high-level member of the Sinaloa cartel, responsible for many of its operations and logistics tasks for drug trafficking to the United States, as well as collecting his clients' profits to transport them to Mexico. Even so, Vicente was convinced that accepting his extradition and collaborating with the United States government was the only way to free himself from a bigger prison, that of the Sinaloa cartel. His father is sad that Vicente had to do that. He knows it's dangerous, but he had no choice, Gasiola told me in one of our first conversations in 2011. It was 8 a.m. An officer arrived and said to me, "Zambada, get all your things ready. You have 5 minutes. Now then," I said, "where else can you take me but to the other side? This is what I've been waiting for a month." I knew that at any moment they would extradite me. They went through all of the exit procedures just like when they transferred me to Matamoros. They took me out in a van the same way, handcuffed and cuffed. In 3 or 4 minutes, the van stopped and they got me out. There were a lot of federal agents and plainclothes men. They put me on a white helicopter. That's what I could see. It was a large helicopter. They put me in the middle. There were 4 seats in the middle, plus 3 in the back and 3 in the front from what I could see. 2 people on my left and 1 on my right. A woman got in front of me. She was from Foreign Affairs and another person from Human Rights with her. In the back were 2 federal agents and a DEA agent. The helicopter takes off. The PFP commander asks me, "How are you feeling?" I tell him I'm fine. Okay, don't worry, calm down, everything's fine, sit up straight, keep your head up, no problem. I'm going to loosen the handcuffs. Yes, please, I said. My hands are hurting. Oh, man, a lot of crying. Yes, I noticed, he said, and spoke to the attorney and the human rights officer. Look, he said, just so you know, it was already coming from inside. There's no need for this, I said. My hands were already blue from the tightness of the handcuffs. After about 30 minutes, I saw the helicopter descending and I saw it was an American airport. The first thing I saw was the American flag. The helicopter descends, stops, and we're surrounded by many DEA agents, all of them in civilian clothes wearing jackets and vests with the insignia. That's how I knew. The PFP agent asked the DEA agent if they should take their weapons down or leave them in the helicopter. A DEA agent told him, bring them, no problem, and they brought them down. And they brought me down. It was a large esplanade. I walked along, and there was a long line of DEA agents checking and looking around, guns drawn. They take me to an office. The PFP commander hands me over. A DEA officer grabs me. They put me in a room, and two people stand at the door to guard me. The lawyer arrives and tells me that I've just been handed over to the American government, and from this moment on, I'm in their charge and care, and he wishes me luck. He takes a picture of me before leaving. They leave, and I stay there. It's already a different atmosphere, to be honest. They ask me if I want to go to the bathroom, if I want something to drink or eat. I tell them no, that I'll come back in a bit. They tell me it's fine. They take me to another office, take all my information, my fingerprints. I sign some papers, and they tell me my rights. See, you got actual rights here, huh, supposedly. Oh, seems like a sweet deal to come to the USA. After about 4 hours, they tell the DEA agents that everything is ready, that they can take me. They pick me up, ask me if I want to go to the bathroom before we leave. I say yes. They take me out for another walk on the large esplanade. There's a private plane in the middle of the esplanade with agents deployed all around. They put me in. Three DEA agents get in with me, sit me in the back, and tell me it's 3 hours to Chicago, that they'll transfer me there right away, and that I should relax and calm down. We arrive in Chicago. The plane lands and glides slowly onto the runway. After 10 minutes of driving, it enters a large hangar, and there are about 6 cars and several DEA agents. They get me out and put me in a van, nothing like the ones in Mexico. It's a normal luxury van. They put me in the back and seat me between 2 DEA agents, 2 others in front, plus the driver and co-pilot. And in a convoy of 5 cars with sirens on, clearing the way and running red lights as if someone were coming. After 30 minutes on the freeway, we entered downtown Chicago. They took me inside of a building and the door was already open. Police cars were scattered along the street, stopping traffic. We entered as if it were a warehouse, and they told me, stay seated here, don't move. I'm being told I'm being sent to a federal prison, the Metropolitan Correctional Center, MCC, in Chicago, Illinois. It was Thursday afternoon, and that I have my first court date on Tuesday the 22nd. My lawyers were already aware of this, and that they've already notified them. One of the defense attorneys in Chicago, trained by his father and mother with the wealth of legal expertise to protect Vicentillo's interests, was none other than Fernando Gacciola. On February 23, 2010, Vicentillo attended his first hearing in the Northern District of Illinois Court at 11:05 a.m. before Judge Ruben Castillo, who was responsible for directing his trial from the beginning to end. The prosecutor was represented by the ferocious Thomas D. Shakeshaft, and Vicentillo's defense was led by New York attorneys George L. Santangelo and Edward S. Panzer. Vicente Zambada Niebla pleaded not guilty to the charges. Of course he did, at the beginning. Shortly after Vicentillo's extradition, breaking custom and his own rules, Mayo came to light. For Gacciola, it was a message of solidarity with his son, or a threat to his captors. After decades of silence, the drug lord gave an interview to journalist Julio Scherer Garcia, one of the most memorable and respected journalists in contemporary Mexican history, who had a professional rule: if the devil offers me an interview, I'll go to hell. The interview was published in Proceso on April 3, 2010. The meeting had taken place just a few days earlier. It was awkward, with a brief exchange. In the end, it wasn't clear that the purpose of granting the interview what the purpose of granting the interview had been. With every question Scherer asked, Mayo dodged and evaded, and he didn't allow his voice to be recorded either. And Vicente? Scherer asked. I don't want to talk about him for now. I don't know if he's in Chicago or New York. I know he was in Matamoros, Mayo replied. I know he received messages and letters from his son. I have to ask you, I am what I am. Speaking of your son, do you experience his extradition with remorse that destroys your fatherly love? The journalist continued the conversation. I'm not going to talk about my son today. I'm crying for him, said the boss. The rest were just phrases pulled out in a jumble. There were two symbolic ones. Will they finally catch him? Mayo's reply, anytime or never. Turned out the godson made it anytime. Then he provoked them with the biting reflection. One day I decided to surrender to the government so they could shoot me. My case should be exemplary, a warning to everyone. They shot me, and euphoria erupted. But as the days went by, we realized that nothing had changed. That shit don't make sense. I remember asking Jay Flores a long time ago why Mayo did that interview, and his thought was, he was probably sending his son messages, and that's what it feels like, just from these vague responses and topsy-turvy conversation. The only thing that's certain is that, as of now, October 3rd, 2019, as I write these lines, Mayo has not been arrested. Well, as I read these lines, on March 5th, 2026, El Mayo is in a American federal prison. No one has shot him. And yes, everything remains the same, at least for him. Vicente is going to get the deal he wanted when he arrived at the Sheraton that day. And the U.S. government will avoid a scandal and continue to have the information it wants. Something will be handled in public and something in private. Gasiola predicted in one of his first meetings. Does this deal make El Chapo nervous? I asked Gasiola. The United States government is taking him there, the lawyer admitted. El Chapo feels guilty. He owes Vicente a debt. He'll have to live with the fear that Vicente will betray him. Maybe Chapo's DEA connections that Mayo told Vicente to keep close were a way of Chapo putting Vicente on the chopping block. Remember, he went there for a deal and ended up arrested. There it is, episode 10 of The Traitor. Again, much better chapters than the middle of the book. Less lists. We got more out of this. Again, it makes me feel and think that Mayo didn't see a future for the cartel. Mayo seen this thing falling apart and crumbling the way it has. I don't think that they thought that they could sustain it. Though they had it for however many years they had it, pushing their children to cooperate just seems strange. Why force it on them? Unless you did it in error and you realized it and now you were like, go on, get a deal. But you don't get to get that deal. They would just eliminate you. I'm talking about the everyday Alucin that wants to live this life. They just get rid of you. They don't give you the opportunity to go cooperate. I think Vicentillo always wanted to be in the game. I think he was the heir apparent. And at the end of the day, his father knew, though I've trained him and tried to get him out of these connections that I've curated over the years, this thing is unsustainable. And for all the credit you give these guys, Vicentillo was ready, willing, and able to cooperate. Thirsty to give information. And information he did give, not only in this book, but in his case. When we do our episode of Cartel on Vicentillo, we'll talk about who he talked about in his case. But just looking at this book alone, has to be one of the most prolific snitches in cartel history. Probably told on the biggest people and the biggest amount of them. With that said, next week, the finale. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me what you thought of these chapters in the comments. I'll see you right here for the finale next week. Peace.